this video, we'll walk you through how to weight different columns in your grade center to generate a final grade for your students. Blackboard's Grade Center works on a two-step grading process. So the first part of setting up a grade center is to make sure that there are columns for every student assignment. And those columns can be graded out of anything that makes sense for that assignment. So if you need to grade an assignment out of 25 marks, if you need to grade it out of 97, whatever that looks like, you can set up those columns in whatever way makes the most sense. And the reason for that is because the second part of doing grades in Blackboard is that you can use Blackboard's weighted total column to assign the values towards the final grades of any other columns that have been created in Blackboard. So this will let you do things like take a column that's out of, say, 47 marks and make it worth 15% of the final grade, which means that Blackboard is doing all of the calculations for you. Assuming that you already have your columns set up in Blackboard, and you can do a weighted total column without necessarily having all of the columns ready to go, you'll just have to come back to it later. But assuming that you have some columns set up in your Blackboard, if you come into your grade center, you should see a weighted total column. It will be in your course by default. These columns do get created when the courses get created, so they're usually the only column that you'll see other than your students' names the first time you log in. From here, if you come up to the top of the weighted total column, there's a drop-down menu there. If you click on that, there's an option called Edit Column Information. Choose that, and that's going to pull up some information about that column. Now, the column name is by default weighted total. That usually makes sense for students, so you are welcome to leave that as is. You can certainly change the description if you feel so inclined, but most people don't really bother with that. And the default for the primary display is percentage, which is what we're usually looking for, given that this is a final grade. Now, the pieces that are important are down here, a little further down the page. So if you come partway down, you'll see that we have a couple boxes here. And for basic weighting, we're going to look at this top left box where it says columns to select. And you should see each of the columns that you've set up in your Blackboard. So I have Test 1, Assignment 1, and Presentation. Now to weight these to the final grade, all I have to do is choose the column that I want, and then click on this little arrow to move it over here. You can see that I have a text box now, which means that I can put in whatever that assignment is worth. So let's say that that first test is worth 25% of the grade, and then I can do the same for Assignment 1. Assignment 1 is worth 15, and Presentation. Say that the presentation is 20. You can see that those have been totaled here down at the bottom of that box, so I can see that 60% of my course grade is ready to go there. And this is fine. There is no problem with just doing part of the grade at any given point in time, so long as you come back and include the other columns that need to be included before the end of the semester. So you can do some of that as you go throughout the semester. The other thing that's really important to be aware of is underneath where you assign the weights. So you can see here that there's an option to calculate as a running total. And what this does is it affects how the math is done to calculate the student's final grade over the course of the semester. At the end of the semester, they will wind up in the same place. This just affects what they see as they go through the semester when all of their work hasn't been completed yet. The default in most of our Blackboard courses is that the running total is off. And so what that means is that Blackboard will assume a 0 for any column that doesn't have a grade in it yet, which means that students will start with a fairly low grade at the start of the semester, and they'll build up over time. Now, this approach can give a fairly accurate representation of what their final grade would be if they stopped doing work at any point in the semester, because it is assuming a 0 for any of those columns that don't have a grade in them yet. The other option that you have is to turn the running total on. And if you turn the running total on, it's going to do that calculation a bit differently. So it's going to ignore any columns that don't have a grade in them, and it's going to figure out what the student's grade looks like based only on the grades that have already been submitted. So if a student has done the first couple of assignments and gotten a 75 on each of them, they will see 75 as their grade. If they do really badly on the next assignment, their grade's going to dip, or if they do very, very well, it's going to go up a bit. So their grade will fluctuate. The only thing to be aware of with this is that for students, that can be a little bit confusing sometimes, particularly if they do really well on a number of very small assignments up front, and then start to do less well on assignments that are worth more, because those numbers will start to fluctuate fairly significantly. So either way can work fine. It's usually just a good thing to be aware of so that you can tell your students how those calculations are being worked and why. In either case, those grades will end up in the same place at the end. The one other thing to note, though, if you do turn on that running total option, is that you will have to be sure to put in a 0 for any student work that wasn't submitted. Otherwise, the calculation process will ignore that particular column because of how the running total works. So once you have all of that set and ready to go, you do have a couple more options down here at the bottom. The defaults are probably fine for what most people need. You do want to include this column in Grade Center Calculations. It is important that students are able to see this column, although if there is a reason to hide it temporarily, you can do so here. And whether or not you show statistics is really up to you, although in a lot of cases it can be somewhat stressful for students and does tend to provoke a lot of questions. So the default is no, but you can change that if you so desire. Once all of that is set up and ready to go, you can click on Submit. I am getting a warning here just to let me know that my sum is not 100%. In this case, it is just a warning. That's totally fine. I just have to remember to come back and make sure that I put the rest of my student assignments in so that those get included in that final grade. When I click on OK, we will go back to the Grade Center, and nothing has really changed here, but if I did start going in and putting in grades for my students, for instance, if I put in a presentation grade, we can see here that that weighted total is going to start calculating. So that's all you need to do for a fairly straightforward weighted total setup. And that will start to calculate a student's final grade so that they can see where they are at the class at any given point in time.